Muy buenos días. Estamos en el cuarto Congreso de Construcción de Paz con Perspectiva de Género.
Good morning. This is the fourth Congress of Peace Building with Gender Perspective. We have this wonderful panel, Gender, Peace, and Security. This is another panel that has been wonderful, learning so much. This has been organized by the International League of Women in Spain, the problem of gender and inclusion from Ibero in Mexico. In order to welcome us, to give us the welcome address, we have Mr. Pablo Reina, who's going to be with us this morning. Pablo, you have the floor.
Micrófono. Pablo. Veo el micrófono de Pablo apagado. Ya.
Sí, buen día. Me tenían que autorizar el uso del micrófono.
I need to get the microphone open. Good morning, everyone. Everyone here at the Zoom platform, as well as those of you in YouTube and all the different spaces where we have this huge Congress, so diverse. I want to thank Elvia González del Pliego, the invitation to be here at Ibero, Mexico City. And for us, this is an effort of peace building with gender perspective through these collaborations, partnerships, and friendships that happen after 4 congresses to work together, to get to know each other, to listen to each other. This is a commitment that we assume as part of Iberoamericana University, as Ibero overall, to find an upper education university that can contribute critically in a way with knowledge, with critical contribution, what it means, peace building, and all of this. I want to thank you, the International League of Women for Peace in Spain, and those of you who are going to participate in this panel in gender, peace, and security, for your trust, for your partnership, for the friendship that we all have been investing in building this 4 congresses in gender, peace, and security. I just have an idea of great concern for me, and that I have discussed in the different spaces of incidents. If these models from top down if this is not building peace, they're not building democracy. Conditions of not violations to human rights, this security models, hegemonic models, because we need to understand for whom they're being useful. All of this built with methodology from the feminist perspectives. Maybe we can build conversations, understandings that help us and that have the objective peace building, not only the management that make this feasible in Mexico and many places in Latin America. I want to thank you and to listen to you. I give the microphones to you, back to you, and have a wonderful day. Hello, good afternoon. Well, it's good afternoon in Spain, in Madrid.
¿Me escuchan?
Can you hear me?
Sí, me escuchan, ¿verdad?
You can hear me, right?
Perfecto.
Okay, yes.
Vale, pues
Okay.
nada, desde España, en este caso desde
From
Madrid,
Spain,
buenas tardes.
from Madrid,
Buenos días a la gente que nos está escuchando desde
for those people that can listen to us from Mexico City, it's a pleasure to be here from this collaboration between Spain and Ibero. It's so interesting the way in which we continue weaving sources and relationships for peace building in Spanish. It's an absolute privilege to have the four speakers this morning, afternoon, to continue walking in a basic topic in gender, peace, and security. We have been around for so many years, and throughout all of this time, we have articulated first-level conversations, evaluations that are basic, that put on the table what we have done, what we have worked on that are outside of the focus of activity in this work, and to bring it to the spaces that beyond the classic things of militarization allow us to build peace under different modalities. We're going to give space to each one of the four speakers. Each one is going to have 20 minutes to present their conversations, and then we're going to leave time for questions. Without anything further, I want to thank you once again, and I want to give the floor to Maria Vantillas Briño, who is an investigator from conflicts and peace building at the School of Culture of Peace at the University of Barcelona, specialized in gender analysis, peace building, and armed conflicts. She is part of the International League of Women for Peace and Freedom and the network Mediating Women in the Mediterranean, Master in Women's Studies with a certificate program in gender equality, and she has taken on investigation in Colombia, New Zealand, India, and she is co-author of the annual report on conflict, peace building since 2002. In 2006, she took on also an international seminar for studies on women from the University of Zaragoza, and she will explore the topic of women participation in the processes of peace building. Thank you, Maria. You have the floor. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, those of you in Mexico. I would like to thank University Iberoamericana, Elvia Gonzalez, all our colleagues that have made it possible to hold this Congress, for this a wonderful opportunity to be able to get together on the other side of the Atlantic. To me, this is a privilege to share this table with Mexican colleagues and colleagues from Colombia. At this presentation, I'm going to share with you some thoughts about the participation of women in peace negotiations. I would like to start by reading a phrase from the Secretary General of the UN in the last report on women, peace, and security with respect to the context of the pandemic that we are going through right now, and that places us at what are some of the challenges that we have to deal with. The implications of the pandemic for peace and international security are deep, among other things, because the adoption process for political decisions are going to bring women to be more marginalized when there are more peace agreements being negotiated from the UN. They're setting a very important alert to the obstacles that we're going to have to face in order to achieve that all the advances in the last few years are not lost. As Estefania mentioned, it has been 20 years since Resolution 1325 has been um, approved in Women, Peace and Security. Since this resolution was approved, we have moved some advances in the participation of women in peace processes. We are not far from a desirable horizon where women see and are acknowledged, but also protected and practice the right to political participation. Some of data that is not so recent and that are offered in this report of the Secretary General
entre el año 1992
gathered that between 1992 and 2019, women were on average 13% of the people that negotiated in peace processes. A good percentage of the people that executed all the mediation and 6% of those who signed the agreement. So these are figures that are non-inviting to optimism. On the other hand, in a more positive note, the percentage of peace agreements that included things about gender equality, they went from 14 to 22%. So we can see an evolution that is a little bit more positive. All of these advances that we have seen in the past few years are non-irregular, non-illegal. We have followed a growing curve in this respect, particularly because throughout the past 20 years, we can see 4 or 5 years more recently, particularly on the hand of the consolidation of political leaderships, conservative, internationally, and we are going through a certain setback of women in peace processes. I would like to see a couple of examples in the peace processes. We have the peace process in Colombia that ended in 2016 with signature of a peace agreement that placed us in the horizon of what's possible. Even with all the limitations that we have seen, I can say that it's what's desirable, because the work of incidents of women with peace made it possible to have the participation of women in the negotiation, because it was part of the demands until it was included in the peace process, with many limitations, with so many obstacles, particularly once the agreement was signed. Women saw the acknowledgement of some of the specific impacts of gender that the armed conflict had in its life. They had the opportunity to express some ideas very specifically in the peace agreement. I don't want to go any further because I know that we have seen a lot more detailed this process, and I think you would probably share some of your non-reflections on this process, but it's important to point out that Colombia places on the table the idea that it's possible to achieve processes of peace and even to have women. On the other hand, we have a more recent peace process, the case of Afghanistan, that is taking place currently, a peace process that is going through two parallel lines: negotiations with the government of the United States and Taliban that in the month of February, ended up in an agreement to withdraw the troops in the United States from the country. We have to say that in 2001, when the United States was invading Afghanistan, a good part of the discourse was set in the defense of the rights of women that were violated by the Taliban regime. Yes, we have to intervene Taliban to protect women, of course, but 20 years later, when the withdrawal agreement is signed, the result is a process that has not had the participation of any woman, no woman has been present in this process. In this country, as I said, there's a process that is transforming every day, a second one that is taking place right now happily. The armed government is negotiating the incidents, trying to show a political solution to the armed conflict that the country is going through. After so many pressures by women organizations, they have achieved that 4 out of the 21 people that are part of the negotiators to be women. And there is no woman in the Taliban negotiating team. Spain, this is an organization that has faced the political and military action in the complete exclusion of women from public space. We have at the same time, currently, examples that it is possible for women to participate in peace processes, and at the same time, the reality of the international strategy that shows how women are absent from these negotiation spaces. And what I think is so important to underscore is that in this 20 years of the application of 1325, even though many processes are taking place without the participation of women, direct participation of women, in pretty much all the peace processes in the world, women have been organized to demand the organization, the participation. If there's no answer, maybe it's because of a lack of political will, not because there are no women placing on the table proposals, demands, experience, that women are within the processes, in the peace processes, beyond the classic format of women participating in the negotiations. They have also developed in the past few years different formats that are parallel, alternative, by the civil society, or where the parties under conflict consult women, not so much with the capacity for decision, but yes, capacity to set proposal on the table. And I believe this is a way to start opening some gaps in these patriarchal situations where women can see that they should not be facing these situations. We have spaces in Syria where the UN granted women a consulting role. Some women who had the opportunity to participate as negotiators, women from the civil society, getting organized to be there and to have their voices heard. In other contexts, women also have undertaken processes of incidents and not to have a role that is so important. And we could really look at all the peace processes that are open right now. Most of them, we find women organizations and civil society with proposals on this. In 2015, the UN made a very important study to assess how the first 15 years had taken place. And
este estudio en el que se evaluaban muchas
this
cosas,
study that evaluated so many things peace processes stated that the participation of women is a tool for peace building that is extremely effective. I personally come from the idea that the participation of women
No me
is
gusta tener
a
una visión
right,
utilitarista, ¿no? Sobre la
and we're
presencia de
looking
las
for
mujeres
a
en la
vision
política y en la construcción de la paz.
of
Pero
taking
es
women to
que además de ser
politics.
un derecho
And
fundamental, ¿no?
it's
De
true that
obligado
not only is this a fundamental right for the states, that is a part of everything for the elimination of discrimination against women, it is true that the participation of women takes us to build everything. In the past few years, we can see different research or investigations that have tried to assess the impact of the participation of the presence of women in peace processes, not only women, but civil society at large, and other organizations, indigenous peoples, LGTB organizations, African American communities. And it's also important to understand that women participation to inclusive processes where civil society and the entire diversity and plurality has been taken into account. That's why there's an interesting analysis of 48 peace processes as well as political transitions. And it said that when women had the capacity not only to participate, but to have an influence in the results of these negotiation processes, that increased the probabilities to reach an agreement. And I don't know, but the participation of women had a negative impact. And I think this is very important because this shows also how women organizations, how this was crucial to sign agreements. It was extremely important to overcome moments that are frequent and normal. These are processes that are so difficult to end in our conflict. It's not something easy that we should not face in so many obstacles. The presence of women organizations that are committed with negotiating all of these armed conflicts that show us that we can negotiate these obstacles, and the peace agreements that are reached at a later date could be applied effectively. However, there's still a lot of resistance to include women. This is largely part of the stereotypes that identify women as victims of violence and therefore are non-capable or have serious problems to overcome this condition of victims. And we're going to hear a lot of arguments against this simplifying vision of women in conflict context. But it is true. All of this in women, peace, and security has helped us to move forward and to have a priority in the different aspects that have to do with the protection of women in front of violations of human rights, like sexual violence, and not so much to strengthen that participation in the image of women as peace builders. The approval of the platform of Beijing in 1995 and also Resolution 1325 has tried to overcome that vision with those difficulties that they were referring to. Women in the context of armed conflict are political subjects with the capacity of doing other things, and the experience is diverse. Even though there's so much being said and everything is just impregnated of victimizing women, the obstacles in this simplistic vision of women, we have to add, a long list of difficulties, logistics, social, cultural conciliation, not only the security of women that are trying to participate and that are trying to defend human rights. I think it illustrates the difficulties, how in Colombia we can see, and in some other countries we can see how women that are committed to peace building, they can see their own lives affected, even murders of women that defend violence. We can see the huge difficulties that they have to face in this context.
Hay además, ¿no?, una falta de recursos para
A
favorecer
lack
la
of
participación de las mujeres
resources
de
to
los
help the
gobiernos
participation of women, the commitment of the government,
falta de confianza y de cooperación
and there's also a lack of trust and cooperation between the government and civil society. And we can see how in different contexts and different countries where the extreme right is moving forward, the space of participation for civil society is shorter and shorter. And for women, this is so clear. Here, there are misinterpretations, cultural, religious, that are related with the dignity of women that make it difficult for their participation. Besides a lack of knowledge in the agenda of women, peace, and security that make it difficult to consider this as an important thing. The increase of militarization at the international level, it's very serious for the participation in the processes of peace. I believe that it's also important to say that the agenda has a pending challenge, which is to strengthen
el movimiento
partnerships
LGTBI, ¿no?,
with the
para
movement
promover una
and not
perspectiva
to
de género
promote a perspective of gender and inclusion that goes way beyond of the gender dynamism for women, because organizations and activists LGTB are a stakeholder that moves to the acknowledgement of human rights throughout the world, and also in context of armed conflict. And they can be stakeholders in the defense of armed conflicts, the defense of peace processes and inclusive processes. We can see this in the peace process in Colombia that was a breaking point with respect to the capacity of mobilization and incidents in the peace agreement and with the
las
LGTB
organizaciones de
groups.
mujeres
And
feministas y
how
también las organizaciones
in
LGTBI
Colombia, the organizations of feminists and LGBTs, they were able to overcome diverse divisions to get stronger, strengthening both collectives. And how we have found in other places that this is clear, but very interesting how they're trying to strengthen these partnerships. In the case of Turkey, also, LGTB organizations have set organization and cooperation, anti-militarists, trying to find a solution that is dialogue with conflict between state and the armed groups. I think one of the challenges in the agenda with the feminist groups has to include the strengthening of the intersectionality. And last, to close, I would like to point one of the important challenges for the next few years to achieve that the implementation processes for peace agreements should be inclusive with respect to women and gender focus, not to be just the part of the process that refers to negotiation, but once the peace agreements are achieved, it's important to keep the participation of women in order to achieve peace building that is effective, to achieve more robust processes of implementation that reduces the levels of frustration because of the implementation to apply peace agreements is a huge challenge that usually takes us to a lot of frustration because not always you can achieve all the transformation expectations so big that come with a peace agreement. And therefore, it's so important that peace agreements include clauses in gender equality, that you can feel the basis for transformations in gender equality throughout the post-war processes. The implementation of the content of this agreement is what gives place to the true transformations once you can silence the arms. The real opportunity to move towards gender equality is done by the implementation of these peace agreements. The entire process is important, but if it's just an agreement in paper, well, then we don't have any aspirations and to implement the resistance that is going to be similar than what has made it difficult for the active participation of women. To close and to give room to the rest of my colleagues, I would like to say that 2 decades after the approval of 1325, the advances in participation in peace processes have been scarce and the pending challenges are huge. But examples that are relatively successful, like in the case of Colombia, show that with political will is to achieve significant advances that will show us more active participation of women with the capacity to transform. Thank you so much.
Gracias, María.
Thank you, Maria.
Muchas gracias, María.
Thank you, Marianne.
Sobre todo porque has puesto
Because
para el debate,
you have set before us for debate
has puesto para el debate temas importantísimos como
important topics like the opening to more inclusive processes of participation, advances in extreme right, which is basic militarization. You have really set on the table important topics to really look at all of this and to work on these questions for the end of times. We're going to have Maria Eugenia Blandón, who's going to talk about peace building from the diaspora and Colombian women in the 2019. And then Maria Eugenia is a student of PhD psychology in Barcelona, and she's also a social worker in public and in the public sector in Colombia and Brazil, and feminism, peace, health, and immigration. She's a participant of Mujer Diaspora and some other groups. This point of view in peace building from the diaspora. So this is basic. Maria Eugenia, you have the floor.
Por la presentación. Gracias,
Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Maria. We are happy to hear from you. This is a great opportunity because we want to share the experience in detail about what it was for us to participate with you from our group. My presentation is not going to really mention about different processes, and we want to emphasize the way that we did things because we believe that is a way to build peace. What Maria has said is very important. Thank you. is not just something added, it's a right that we have as a collective and the participation of the processes. So I think it's extremely interesting, and something more that you made reference to start is that you were talking about the political agency that we have in the groups where we don't always have access to knowledge. So there's about alternate knowledge that has to be present in the peace processes, and that we know that historically we are part of history that is acknowledged and much less peace processes. So I believe this participation is not just from victimization, but the criticism that we know. But I believe that if I go into position it, what has happened in women with were from gender perspective, and to show the victims and the type of victims, the difference that we have, and it goes hand in hand with resilience and the participation because we want to present our experience. I'm going to be sharing my screen.
Uy, ¿se está viendo?
Ujú.
¿Sí? ¿Se,
Sí.
se estaba viendo la
Can you
pantalla?
see it?
¿Se ve ahora el Canva? No se está viendo.
Can you see
perdón.
Canva?
Disculpa que lo vuelvo a intentar como lo hice antes en el ensayo. Y si no, como decía la otra compañera, pues volvíamos.
And like my colleague was saying, then we can go directly, but I want to share this. Okay, now can we do it? Okay.
Este es el logo que ha hecho una de las mujeres que vive en diáspora.
This is the logo of made by one of the women that live at the diaspora. And it's one of her contributions to the project that was called Commission of Truth, Memory of Reconciliation of Women Abroad, and that in turned into the process of Mujer Diáspora. But at the beginning, that's what we called it. The experience of this is building everything together. She contributed with all of this. I want to share these two phrases that summarize the experience of working with the testimony of women before the agreements were signed during the peace agreement. And is this by Cortázar that says, words are not enough when what you have to say comes from the soul. But to be at the distance of conflict, to be as a diaspora, summarizes this word about what it means to live and going through this war situation. So when we approach conflict, this phrase is what summarizes the circumstance that was shared by your testimony. And of course, this phrase by Rosario Castañados that is, you know, like a pitcher that is full of water. I am overflowing. You share the testimony of what you're going through and the circumstances that you want to share as your testimony in order to contribute to the memory, to the condition of truth, but at the same time, it's at a place where it cannot move anymore. Breaking silence is about to break down. And just to try to locate the context in which we have done the project, from the negotiations in 2010, the state and the different tables that are set for negotiations, along with everything, sets the tables abroad in different places that are called victim fora. And from the first tables here and in London, there's a group of women that participate in this call. And among them is the creator of the project Mujeres Diáspora, and they participate together. They talk about how they're going to bring this together and how they invite everyone to be part of the peace process from the diaspora, and how it is necessary to differentiate something that needs a feminist look, and there's a need for responsible listening, the pain and the way that the concept of memory is being worked at. So there's an experience in London, but this borderline experience with the idea that is complemented with what we do at the rest of the people that have participated between London and Barcelona, it starts generating how to work on this, how we can contribute from this time when this peace process is being negotiated, that to see that with everything that is going on in this century, if we can get to an agreement. So we see that the diaspora conditioned in the project is a privileged place, is a place that is different, that invites us to do work from a different perspective. So we explore not only the concept of what we have, we're going to have fora of victims, we're going to be working abroad from the concept of diaspora, from the concept of victim. And I want to share this phrase from Japón Lidera, that is one of the precursors of everything about peace construction, peace building. And this has been one of the people that have inspired with his contributions. And we believe that we reach this part of working from what's simple, from the stories, that from everything that is deep. So I want to share with you that the most complicated challenge in peace building is the essence, and how we can see how easy being simple to contribute at that time, because if you're making this call, we can get to a place where there's a complicity, where you can listen by heart. As we talked at the beginning, another important element of this project is that we were working in Barcelona, particularly with other diasporas, with the African diaspora, with the diaspora from Morocco. We were talking about being with Latin American women from other countries, and the women in diaspora, like the women in Afghanistan. You know, there's a woman that is taking hugs, and it was a very moving story in this event, and a lot of this, and Palestine from Syria. And I think that due to the experience, this made it rich and made it very important in order to feel what Maria was saying, you know, the situation about women and collectives that were not acknowledged from a globalization that wants to contribute for everything that is it means for the wars. So I see the positive part of globalization, and I think this is an important element to share. I wanted to go deeper into the presence, into the presentation of the experience, and I want to share LeatherX, because sometimes when we have a presentation, oh, why have they done this? Why everything looks like magic? And we consider that what we attempt with this experience is to listen to this intuition and to bring to the cognitive and what we know that this helps healing, and we see that we are going to be and feel like integral people that we are there. In the specific case of our experience, I'm going to explain the core elements, and I think this can be really interesting If you're listening to us for the first time, there's some central elements that is the kitchen. The kitchen, why? Because the kitchen for us was a way to think that we're always thinking about the feminist look and how we build critical psychology, that we need to recover spaces and to give it a sense of healing. And for us, the kitchen, it's about looking at the testimonies in a different manner. The kitchen, for those of us who are outside of diaspora, it's something that is cross-sectional, to the rich, to the poor, to the victim. We're all in the same place, and it takes us to remembering something that is kind. We work with the testimony, and we asked them to tell that what they wanted to cook from Colombia, what they wanted to get back as a present. And every testimony, they would get a ritual. Maybe, and they were broader. And this was one of the testimonies that were public, and to the right, to the left, and the Colombian ballerina to the left that is performing an improvised choreography from after listening to the stories. This is the kitchen. When we see the valuing of the kitchen and what it means about when we tell about the testimony. The symbolic space that is created before and after telling the testimony. And when we talk, when we write, and I wanted to eat this. I don't know if I want to have this person talk, or I want this. I want the public. I don't want in private. It's just that, like, walking with them to prepare them, and then on the day where they were going to have it, where they wanted, if they wanted open, if they wanted close, how they wanted the environment. So we invited them to have to bring maybe a doll or maybe an element and something like that. You can ask because I know that when we have something different, it sounds like so many things, and we're so open, because if this experience has something, is that we have this for construction. We are going to be talking about other important things, and the topic about diaspora, and we believe that the diaspora element is very important. And this is very important. That is not always possible to have when you are in the country. And to be able to share this with people that are not from Europe, and to be able to establish from certain confidence that generates to be outside. It's a way to humanize all these topics of peace and to give back the character of meeting among humans. And I think it's very important. And another element that comes together to work with the memory and the testimony is that in the narration, in the narrative, the person that is doing this is a reference to the process. And we consider that it's valuable to bring this together and to offer this a different presence in the context of peace and negotiation. Some women have mentioned that after participating, they were putting together their own testimony, their own history. Something that has happened is that people have participated so much with their testimonies and listening. The people have the possibility of participating just by going once, or participating in all the activities that we want to discuss, the activities for training. And I wanted to share with you the testimony of one of the people that heard, and it's really interesting because it's one of the few guys that participated. He traveled to Colombia, he talked to his family, his mother had been kidnapped, and he said, oh, well, I was able to talk to my family. I had never said it, but after participating in everything, I'm capable to explain this, and now I feel that I want to explain this. I want everybody to understand this. So very spontaneous, and not only the 30 something testimonies that we gathered, very specific, but all the process and a different construction of working with the possibility of a powerful training. We can see here the picture of our psychologist that has a lot of experience in Switzerland and Sweden, and we had different synergies with the different entities in Catalonia because we considered that everybody should be part of this ritual and respect about listening. A lot of information in this respects. There were valuable opportunities in the entire process to be able to share in this project because there's so much information on the internet in this group. This project was working spontaneously in Medellin to recover spaces with situations that were very painful, and through art, not to plant it again, to plant life again with the different testimonies to go along with this process. Some workshops in writing, theater, and different workshops where they participated in different testimonies, but they had the possibility to see if whatever they want, all these processes could be transformed into a book, into a movie that is about to be going out, and the different workshops. So it was like going along with the possibility of transforming not only what we know that is already happening under the conditions, but the possibility of being transformed. I went in and I participated in the project, and I saw the silence, and I saw the need, everything that is done with the memory, with everything. Everything is valuable. We don't criticize, but it's just like going a little bit beyond of what we have seen. The experience, like moments later after telling the testimony, and maybe the part of after the testimony to see the energy, the warmth of sharing. We had different group debates sharing the testimony. I recalled, Maria, that you were at the 1325 as one of the ways that the collective of people that were listening to this should know some of the things that are happening, activism for peace, everything that is going on. So in the last part, I wanted to give you all this information, 3 testimonies, and all of this includes what we have discussed about the workshop, the testimonies, the trends that were being presented, and with the participation about 30% of people that are non-Colombian, other diasporas from Catalonia, and we were thinking about all these topics where we thought that we were going to be able to explain this. We were about 1 hour to sign this, and it was not possible because the political movement did not allow this. And after telling you all of this, 2 of the ways that we found to close the process, the transformation of all the testimonies in the important areas like Marta Gomez, very famous singer.
estas historias. Ella es una de nuestras
She is one of the great allies,
talleres en los que ella presentó cómo hace ella sus
and she
canciones.
presented how she puts together her music. It was a way to share with women how to build a song from stories, and it's something extremely important. Another activity that we put together in Barcelona, it has been done in London as well, but in Barcelona there were 2 sessions of 10 hours with a photographer, and each one of the women was getting her picture taken. And this is one of the ways in which they wanted to show up. They're the pictures of different participants, and with this smile from their agency of what they were able to share, I wanted to leave you with. I have the video created that I believe that has been put together.
Creo, Estefanía, que... Ah, vale. Si quieren ir haciendo...
Estefanía, if you want to ask questions in the meantime.
Perfecto.
Ya llegó el video.
Está preparado.
Mano fuerte va barriendo, pone leña en el fogón. Mano firme cuando escribe una carta de amor. Manos que tejen haciendo nudos, manos que rezan, manos que dan, manos que piden algún futuro para no morir en soledad. Allá, allá. Mano vieja que trabaja, baila dando algún telar. Mano esclava va aprendiendo a bailar su libertad. Manos que amasan curtiendo el hambre con lo que la tierra les da. Manos que abrazan a la esperanza de algún hijo que se va allá.
Fuego, manténlo prendido, fuego, no lo dejes apagar y grita fuego, manténlo prendido, fuego, no lo dejes apagar y grita fuego, fuego, prendido, fuego, no lo dejes apagar, vaya, y no lo dejes apagar.
Y mujeres, tenemos que ser cómplices. No existe color. No hay países diferentes.
There's no color, there are no different countries. We're all together in one.
Muchísimas gracias, María Eugenia. Ha sido un
Thank you,
placer
Maria Eugenia.
terminar con esta
It has been wonderful to close with this. I think that you have mentioned important things to see the entire framework of responsible healing, listening, the rituals in respect to listening, tools that are fundamental. Thank you, because it's important for the transformation of the testimony and all of this and what we're doing this afternoon. So we're going to give time now. We're going from the diaspora in Colombia. We're going to Mexico, and we're going to give time to Regina Neguiteri, that is going to talk to us about the effect of militarization of women in Mexico. And she has a degree in law by ITAM. She has a master in international law with a specialty in human rights by American University. She's currently studying the PhD in the social anthropology, she's also a coordinator of public policies and justice for women. She has worked in different places like INAI, the National Commission of Human Rights, Mexico, the Mission of Mexico before the UN in New York, international law and public. And as I've said, she is going to show us what's happening of militarization of women in Mexico.
Ahora sí me escuchan.
Can you hear me? Yes, Isabel.
Buenos días desde México. Muchísimas
Good
gracias,
morning
Estefanía.
from Mexico. Thank you,
Muchas gracias por
Stefania.
la invitación.
Thank you for the
Quisiera agradecer muchísimo a
invitation.
María
I
Eugenia
want
por
to
lo que nos
thank
acaba de compartir.
Maria Eugenia for
La
what she
verdad es
just shared
sumamente
with us
inspirador,
because
sobre todo ahorita en
it's
México, que estamos en un
inspiring
momento
in
de
Mexico.
muchísima tristeza.
We are undergoing a moment of so much
Tuvimos
sadness. 2 days ago,
de
we
compañeras
went
en
through the
Cancún,
repression of our colleagues in
estaban,
Cancun with weapons because they were protesting against the feminicide of a colleague. And today we have, sexual attacks. So to see this type of situation, to see all of this going on, in Mexico, we're undergoing a moment of violence that is particularly difficult, and that's why I bring this before you, because my presentation is not so positive. On the contrary, it's not a situation that is easy, it's complicated. I don't know it would get to a place with the processes of peace. I know that we are at a situation when militarization is really causing damage in the life of women. With the information that I'm going to be presenting to you, you probably can see that not only the problems of violence are not being resolved, but the structure is being damaged. It's important to say that what happened in Cancun 2 days ago, it was because the police is undergoing into a security model that is militarized using weapons, where the National Guard is just there and is being an accomplice of all the situations. There's so many more things to see. I'm sure that Jimena will discuss specifically into this, the challenges that they're undergoing. And this has to do in militarization. My presentation
temas específicos. Uno, cómo los efectos de la militarización.
One of the effects of militarization and how this has increased in lethal violence of women, how this is related with militarization, and
los no efectos de muchas de las estrategias que se han presentado que han sido ineficaces.
out of the strategies that have been
Preguntarme
inefficient
si
in
realmente
Mexico,
terminar la guerra contra las
to
drogas
ask if
y
the war
dejar nada
against
más como
drugs is over
tenemos
and to
ahora
see
para
the different
hablar.
situations that we have
Como
here
saben,
for
la guerra contra las
debate.
drogas en México
The
sigue
war
siendo
against drugs in
internacional,
Mexico has
es
the
una guerra
origins
internacional,
in
perdón,
Nixon. It is an
compañeras de
international
gobierno, no lo
war,
recuerdan, saben mejor que
and
nadie. En México se
we
hace
all know
público
this.
realmente a
In
partir de
Mexico, it's
2006, cuando el
public as
presidente
of
Felipe Calderón
2006
declara la guerra contra
when
las drogas.
Felipe Calderón
Implica
declared the war
fuerzas
against war.
federales,
It means the deployment of the federal forces, the Marine, the Army, and the different operations in Mexico in order to achieve civic security. This has had brutal effects in the livelihoods of women.
Vimos que incrementó,
We have seen
incrementó casi 4 veces la tasa de asesinatos de las mujeres
that the rate of murders to
sobre
women increased fourfold between 2007 and 2016. From 2004 to 2016,
con arma de fuego. Esto quiere decir
and
que
the women that were murdered with weapons, 6 out of every 10 women are murdered with a
espantosas.
firearm in
Muy
Mexico.
importante también,
This is
la
very
mayoría
important.
antes de 2009,
Before 2009,
2009, la mayoría de las mujeres
between 2007
morían en el espacio privado y hoy
and
mueren
17
en espacios
women were dying in a private space. And as of 2006, we can see murders of violence. And as this was being expressed, it's clear that it happens in different areas. The municipalities where women die in private space are different from the municipalities where women die in public space. And the municipalities where women die in public space, it's more deaths where more men die in the public space. So this means that this has to do with organized crime. This has changed in the pandemic. We continue with the murder of women. And besides that, we have had an increase of violence in the private space. So all this has increased. They have happened because the state has really folded down. Many communities have closed because they're afraid that COVID is going to be impregnated. And with this, it has given the opportunity of groups of organized crime to take control. And with this, the violence. Likewise, I would like to mention that another one of the concerns that is clear is that about this people missing due to this war. What's interesting, it's according to different data now, 1/10, of these women are murdered this way. And there was a report about what to do if someone went missing, how to collect. If you are the one that has to gather the information, what is the role of the state? And that's another one of the problems. And another thing that is affected is that is clear in this case is incarceration. And this has to do with the war against drugs. 43% of the population federally is in jail because of minor crimes. What does this mean? It's in first place, and we can see 103% increase, and most of those women are detained by the Marine and the Army. Obviously, this happens when they have gender stereotypes. The why is, this is what I'm going to try to deal with the numbers. So first is that most of the women are detained for possession with the purpose of selling. That means that they have a little bit more of the drug that is allowed. This means that they are transporting small amounts from one place to another. They're called mules. They are caregivers at home. It's the first time that they are criminals, and the crime is without violence. So here, this is going to take us to this problem, and we would like to ask if this is what we want. And these women live through a triple stereotype because they're women and because they have been sanctioned with something related. When we analyze the numbers, they're really alarming. These women and that have been detained by the Marine and the Army. It's very sad when we look at the armed forces. Only 3% of men that have been taken into custody by the Army have an order of arrest. All the rest of the cases are flagrantly. That doesn't mean that that means that it's very easy that they are fabricating the evidence. 1.3% of women have a protection order. We're talking that 99% of women are detained without a protection order, placing them at risk. That is very clear. And with the data that I'm going to be presented, it's going to be even more clear with the different interviews that we have performed where women can tell us how things happen. And this is related with this information according to the National Survey of Penitentiary Information. When we look at the women that were detained by the Marine, only in the case of the Marine, only 19% say that they committed a crime, and women that tell you that they committed a crime, in the case of Marine, it's 66.9%. In the case of the Army, 64.9%. And when we look at the police, it goes down exponentially. In Mexico, unfortunately, torture is a generalized practice. However, the Marine has a high percentage of different actions, burning and just torture. It's really impressive when we look at this, and this is part of the survey. In the case of women that have been detained by the Marine, 41% declare having been tortured sexually. Almost half of the women that were detained by the Marine declared that they were tortured sexually. In the case of the Army, 21% declared that they were tortured sexually. Women that have been detained and by the National Guard, or they said, "Oh, I'm afraid." This is the part that I talk about, the quantitative part. I had interviews at different prisons for women that have been detained for crimes against health. From the 15 women that I interviewed, the 15 have been tortured sexually, with stories that were unbelievable, with the violations to the rights. This has changed. This, not only this has increased, not been reduced, but it has increased. That people that have been taking their freedom away. There's been no month this year where people are incarcerated in the country has not increased. This is because of the abuse of preventive imprisonment, and not only militarization, but positive populism, where they have increased Article 19 in the Constitution that prevent judicious preventive incarceration. So nor the district attorney nor the judge have to prove that you're at risk of running away, but automatically they put you in jail. Preventing prison affects more women than men. In the case of men, 4 out of every 10 men in prison do not have a sentence. In the case of women, it's 1 of every 2 cases. Women that have been that are not incarcerated. It's just sad to say this. Not only because we can see the judiciary in a system that during the pandemic, and not to take things out, we can see and analyze the reports of the judiciary, reports of the 32 states, and you can see that out of the 32 states, only 8 take the different benefits. You complied a certain percentage of that foresees that you can see and that you can move forward. Out of the 32 states, only 7 foresee the situations that the judiciary is going to analyze. With COVID, what they did is they stop activities and they declare certain activities. Of course, people that have been taken, their freedom away, they include these benefits. 8 know about these benefits. 7, you had to request ahead of time. And they don't even establish the specific criteria nor a dimension of these instruments. Out of the 32 judiciary, only 7 saw and know about training conditions, 6 specifically about this. At the beginning, we were all very excited about this, the perception that this was going to be a debate, and there was going to be a debate throughout this conference. The regulation of drugs. In the case of Mexico, they promoted a law of amnesty in September, promoting for so long legislators about placing it under the framework of COVID, and we were aware that this was not a strategy for COVID, but this was a strategy for the social justice that has been sanctioned as these cases. Sanctioned poverty, sanctioned more the situation of vulnerability of people.
¿A quién le da los beneficios? Bueno, esa fue en
who's getting the benefits? And it could be because of abortion or homicide in the case of if they have close relationship, and this is about women that have had an abortion, or the medical personnel that have helped. There's so many cases at the federal level, but this is a precedent to replicate. Crimes against health, specifically traffic, introduction, possession, just planting or harvesting, but you have to be in the situation of poverty when you perform the crime or committed the crime, having been forced by your partner or organized crime to belong to the indigenous community or Afro-Mexican, or the consumers. It includes also the indigenous communities where the due process was violated and they didn't have an interpreter. When people have undergone violence, people that are under the crime of with social protest and with violent crimes. This is a law that is not perfect, but is looking to revert the crimes that in the case of abortion, we can see for the right of women to say something, and crimes against health, the indigenous communities. All of this that under a unfair system. It's very concerning. And on the April 20th, April 22nd, this is going to go over the files that are requesting the benefits of amnesty. This commission is going to go through the judiciary branch, and the mechanism didn't work. It shows that, and then they think that this might have be more intersectional, more interdisciplinary, but this law cannot be applied nowadays. As I say, this was approved on April 20th. On April 22nd, it was published. On June 18, the commission had the first session. On June 19, the guidelines were published. However, they have been close to 6 months from the time it went into effect, and there's nobody that has received the benefit. And then we have placed a request to the commission, and we are under a situation of COVID where people are dying in prison and they have not undergone a session. Besides, this commission have been under discretionality and opacity. We have contradictory information because we have seen this information, and in a report from the president, they said that they have received 956 files, and the Ministry of the Interior talks about 765. They're going to have a coming session, no date about it, where they're going to look at 75 files, which is 10%. Why are they looking into 10%? Well, it looks like the penitentiary authorities are the ones that are looking into the files. This goes against impartiality because they're the ones applying the sanction. We have two cases where we have requested amnesty. One is the case of Araceli and the other one of Omitila. They're both indigenous women that were taken in jail because of crimes against health and situation of vulnerability. However, in the case of Araceli, on November 1st, the 4 months were up for the commission to decide, and the commission decided that the 4 months didn't start from the time that you filed the request, but from the time that the guidelines were published. So we're still without an answer in this sense, and this situation has to be brought to you at this Congress of Peace Building, because not only we didn't see the end about militarization, the drug was not regulated. We have a law that it's just not working. I want to close with some concerns that are going to be left here for questions. And one is how this National Guard was created. They're in charge of security in Mexico nowadays. There's so many things pending, and its authority has been growing. And at the Custom House, they're in charge. They're in charge of the groups of immigrants. The first recommendation by the National Council of Human Rights because of violation against immigrants. It's really interesting that we document that now the attack maybe is not against to the big heads, but those people that use the drugs. And in this case, we have the problem with all those groups in all those places where women use drugs. As I have mentioned, they continue with punitive populism. So every morning we wake up with the same pressure to create a new crime or to create a new situation. And when I started this reflection, there's an attack to social protest in Mexico, especially in feminism, like in the case of Cancun that I mentioned, that it was the municipal police with a unique head. But the use of violence is really happening, and it's just going all over the place. And in the model of security is unbelievable, because this year it's been 10 years of the year of Fines in Valentina. They were raped by the military. Also, there's another woman, Alvarado, women that were sexually attacked by police officers because of a social manifestation. And also, what I have mentioned, other groups that are growers that are closing the communities, and the organized crime is taking office, and the military as well, increasing violence against women. So this is all that I have. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you, Isabel, particularly for bringing forward all of these different things, and gender, lack of security, everything about the penitentiary industry, about immigration, everything. It's so serious, the impact of the militarization processes, the increase of sexual violence, everything that we have seen internationally, something that is so serious. And I believe that in these three tables, we can see that we're going to have room for great reflections. Our last speaker, Jimena Garcia Cabello, is going to talk about gender violence in women that have been imprisoned after what Isabel has said. She's the institutional director of Reinserta, clinical psychologist from the school in Mexico City, with specialty by the Center of Health and Integral Well-being. She has participated in different certificates programs, psychotherapy and arts. And for the past year, she is part of another other groups guiding the programs of boys and girls in prison. You have the opportunity to talk to us about the situation. Thank you, Stefania. Thanks, everyone, for the space, because this is wonderful to be able to discuss these topics. So I go with this part that Isabel has mentioned: women in jail, women in prison. Thank you for sharing this space.
Ya creo que ahí ya la ven, ¿no? Bueno, pues sí, Reinserta, gracias. Reinserta a grandes
Reinserta is a foundation, non-for-profit. We have been working with men, women in prison, and also with teenagers that are in conflict with the law. In the case of women that are in prison, I would like to start with some of the figures of feminine crime. This is 6% of the total population in jail. It's important to mention that is not just a high percentage, but one of the most significant, important, and because of that, the minority have really seen the situation complicated for women that have been taken into jail, particularly inside the jail.
se considere equivalente a un trato inhumano, ¿no? Algo que
And
sucede.
also when we consider there is inhumane way that they're being treated. We call them, they're not women's prisons, they're mixed prisons. Most of the situation, that's what happens. In most of the cases, women are in a men's prison where they make room for them with a minimum adaptation for women. In some cases, there's just one wall and all the common paces are on the male side. So there's so many problems and they don't even comply with the basic needs of women. And, you don't want to have them on the other side. And there's so many problems that are caused between couples about the situation of the children that live in the jails and the different contexts. In Mexico, the children can be born and stay in jail with their mothers until they're 3 years old. There's a part in the law that talks about the children having the right to fulfill their basic rights that it's outside. So that's something that we have been working on with all the problems. There's not jails that are exclusive for women. It's also very important to take into account that gender perspective, it's just becoming part of all of this. And to make a reality, the right to equality, it's so difficult. Gendered situations is something that continues happening significantly. There's some principles that I want to take into consideration of things that talk about the different rules, and women also have the right to maternity, to breastfeeding, and food, personal hygiene articles, just to mention a few. And, the Bangkok rules, the right care, access to the regulations, legal counseling, medical examination, the safeguarding of their dignity and integrity. There's so many that not taking place, and it's in the book that they should be taken into account. But it's a way to exemplify in some cases, just to mention the situation of some women inside jail. Like in the case of Alex, his mom was taken to a hospital close to the jail for him to be born. And when she got to the hospital, all her belongings were taken away. Some clothing for her child were taken, and they said they couldn't go in because they were dirty and it could affect the birth of the baby. That was what she was told. She questioned the personnel, how she was going to cover up her baby when she was going to take him and when the baby was born. She was told that she could have a sheet to take the baby. She had to take the baby who was premature, wrapped in a sheet, going back to jail. He had a lot of problems, health problems. At that time, at the hospital, they decided that she was not somebody that could have access to this basic needs. This is some of the things that happen to women that are detained. The admission to the Center for the Reinsertion also, to give them a space where they can be with everything. Women that have been taken, their freedom, that have been in prison, how they're separated, how they're taken away from their children. That we've seen so many cases of women that call us and they say, I'm in jail, my children are at home. We had a case that was really impressive about a woman that was taken in prison and her as well as her husband, and they're both taken to jail, and they left their girls 10 and 12. They were accused of kidnapping. And then she called us a few weeks later. She said, I need you to go and get my daughters because they had somebody kidnapped. They continue with the family business. And where are the authorities to take care of these children that were left behind? All the part of the supervision by the male personnel, saying that women, how they should be treated with the female supervision. And this doesn't happen in most of the jails. All the searching, we've seen problems in searching when they go in and look at the women. A little boy that his diaper was just stripped away to see if there was any drugs. Things extremely aggressive in a context that is more and more violent. I'm going to tell you about another case that is important, the case of Mercedes. After a long time, I think something that we have to consider from the time that we are looking at this, how they have like a double judgment,
La ley, en el
the
caso
law.
de ella,
In the case of Mercedes, she was a police officer and she was working. And when she got home, she gets a message that her son fell off a hammock and that she has to go and look at his body. She goes to the hospital and she realizes that her son is dead. And she's told that she has to recognize the body. She sees the pictures. She doesn't recognize her child. They go pick her up and detain her. And they say that her husband and her mother-in-law said that she was at fault. From that point on, she's in jail. So there are different cases, and I think it's really impressive that exemplify how it affects not to be judged with gender perspective, and that society increases this violence for women. We have the case of Carolina that was affected with preeclampsia when she was pregnant. It took her a long time to be cared for. It happens a lot for women that are pregnant, often at the jails. They don't believe that they're about to have the baby, and they have to be negotiating even further to be able to be cared for. And once they're cared for, they're taken, and the conditions at the jailhouse were not appropriate for children. It happens a lot that there are not maternity spaces, there's no room for the children to sleep. They have to sleep with their mothers for early stimulation. They're going to create places that are safe, play places for the children so they can have early stimulation, and they have special games. A child that rolled off the bed without having the space to sleep properly, and he has an important developmental delay. They're trying to work with him and examine him.
también en el área de maternidad justo de esta,
in the area of maternity.
de este caso de Carolina.
In this case of Carolina, they said there are times where I have to be busy. Sometimes when you have to look and cook, and in the meantime, what do I do with my child? It's difficult not to have a safe case, a safe situation. Another case is the case of Danae, born inside a jail. Her mother had not planned to get pregnant. We've heard different stories. We're not clear about this. There were a lot of women and women living with in the same area where she lived, with more children, and also she had a male visit come to see her in jail.
A los reclusorios varoniles, ¿no? Lo cual
there's also supposed to be there's supposed to be a visit for the families that women can go and visit their partners and men can go and visit their partner. How is this happening? Like in the case of Mexico, in Mexico City, and you know, there are buses that come out of the jail and they go to from the male jail to the female jail. But where is this happening for women? Is this consider them as an object? They go to the male jail to visit them. They take the women, and then the next day they go back. So we have so many cases of pregnancies from people that are in jail. They don't even know each other, the men and the woman.
Esto, hablando un poco más también de la detención de
Talking
las
about the women being detained in Mexico, 12.4% of women were pregnant, and 67% were not properly cared for medically. And torture is almost with women that are imprisoned. In the case of pregnant women that didn't believe that they were that they were pregnant, and when the children are born, they have problems breathing, maybe developmental delay. And this is something where in the jail they don't have all the services to be able to care for the children with that characteristic. So how they cannot be part of the educational program, and how can they do it? And this is this fair not to be responsible of the situation that they live? 11.8 were breastfeeding, and 88.2% were not allowed to breastfeed because when they're detained, they're separated. And it's not just a few hours, it's days. So it turns into a huge problem for them. 31% in one of the cases, women are having their period, and they're not provided with the necessary supplies for their period. At the time of their detained, not to have the tools for a woman, and it's a right for them. These are some of the figures of the situation of women that are mothers and they're trying to find social reinsertion. I think it's extremely important to see this, and we have made a study nationwide where we study the entire situation of women, mothers, in different states, where we realize about these figures in so many places. We have to take this into account to keep it in mind. There's also a high percentage of 82% that have children between 1 and 3 years of age. What is the situation that they live from the outside? What do they have access to? Well, maybe they say you should have access to a scholarship, right? Well, you know, they cannot do it. What are they going to be doing for these processes and for these children not to have access to this? And 74% of women said that they don't have the adequate conditions. 57 53% of the women got medical attention, 7% did not have the service.
El 50% de las mujeres reportó no encontrarse en una zona especial de
52% of women said that there was not a special dedicated area for maternity at the center. We've had cases of pregnant women within the jailhouses that because there is not a dedicated space for maternity, and they don't have a space to be safe. And, you know, in some of the jailhouses, that's what happens. And obviously, this is very dangerous. 53% are happy that their children can live with them inside the detention center. They try to develop this relationship with their children. And we believe that for the children, 50% do not feel safe. And some cases, the case of Samuel, he was a child, was it's a mother that was going to the male visits, and he was kind of rowdy if they don't have a relative that goes with them, that takes the children to the outside, then the children do not know the father. So one of the things that we do is we take them to the park, to different places. And in one of these cases, a child that was kind of very restless, and when he went to the bathroom, he would not stop crying. We took him to the doctor, and the doctor said that he was probably being abused, and we believe that it was when he was visiting the male jail. So these are some pictures of what we have done in the jails with gender perspective to have these areas for children, these areas we have the small beds, so the children can have their own space to sleep, healthy areas specifically for the women, recreational areas. And last, we're working hard, hand on hand, with the jail system. We have been doing it in the state of Nuevo León, the state of Mexico, gender perspective. So we can look at all the rights, all the needs of women. You know, all the women, if they are having their period, and when they're detained, how they can take their things. And the jail was closed in Topo Chico, very dangerous in Mexico, and it was just to defend women and how they would be taking their own things. And so they would not be empty-handed when they would go to the next jailhouse. This is basic to establish the measures for protection to women against torture And we see here about training everyone. It could be the custodians, like in these cases where they were really thankful and they said, oh, you know, I was not thinking about this. And I believe that here it could be a great advance.
So with this, I close now so that I can entertain your questions. Let me close. Yes. Yes, thank you so much, Jimena. Thank you so much. Before anything else, there's a question for you. Veronica Arana is asking us, what prison centers are you working at right now? And how can she be in touch with you? We work right now in the state of Mexico, in Santiaguito, in Nesa, Santa Marta, in Mexico City, in Nuevo León, at the Escobedo jail. So you can get in touch with us in contact reinserta.org. We can tell you about our programs there. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jimena. Since we don't have much time for questions, and since this marvelous international congress goes to another panel now, I think we should be reflecting on the ideas we have heard, how to incorporate this situation. What about impact on sexual reproductive rights, political actions, stereotypes that are still there, respect, and how we create spaces to gather testimonies. How do we face up to this, especially in terms of jail situations and migration flows and primitive populism? So how are we going to look at situations of poverty? How we're going to face sexual violence in a very urgent manner? What about gender perspective? And how are we going to be stopping this double judgment position on women? So here we have another question from people that are listening to us. They're asking, and this is for all four of you, if you want to answer, what can universities do at the academic level to continue work and to implement things on women, peace, and security? Very fast, if you have any questions. Please. Could I answer? Could I start? Yes, please. Thank you so much for your question. I think it's very important. I think one of the very important parts is approaching issues like this at the university level. I congratulate Ibero for opening the spaces in terms of militarization and women that are in jail. It's very important for us to do away with stereotypes and to look at this. And I invite you to watch the videos that we've done with the Washington office for Latin America so that you know the lives of those women with this intersectional perspective. There are trans women, women with different characteristics, women with disabilities who are in jail and who have different experiences. So trying to challenge and question our own prejudice about the criminal men or women. This doesn't exist as such, so that we can do away with the good and bad narrative, the narrative about the good and the bad people. And also in terms of security, especially in moments in which we're having so many attacks rather. And I want to invite everyone throughout the world to help us at the university level to look at experiences, Maria Eugenia and everyone. How have you been facing all these problems in Mexico? There are some things that are quite similar among countries, and this way we can generate solutions. Thank you, Isabel. Anyone else, would you like to share your views on how the academic environment can contribute towards organizational experiences? Could you do that, please? Yes. I can tell you in just the 1 minute that I have, because I'm working at the university space, and I think Maria Eugenia has given us very good ideas in her intervention that was so interesting. This is recognizing knowledge, consider it as sub-alternative knowledge. I think there are initiatives like the Ibero University Initiative where we can start a conversation. And this is the academy, of course, but this is very important because it has to do with spaces of activism and direct incidents. I believe it is extremely important for universities because we do face a very important challenge in terms of opening ways for this important knowledge to be shared. This is knowledge coming from social activism and contact with reality, recognizing how knowledge comes from many places and not only from spaces that are of privilege, as for instance, universities. So then I think that being able to hold these conversations among women that are working every day within context of violence and violations of human rights, well, this is very important because this is a space of reflection. But having this exchange is of the utmost importance. I think this exchange with an equitable base to it, and I believe that in the case of the agenda of women, gender, peace, and security, I think, yes, we are very much in contact with different women working in peace building every day. This is a very good example of this fruitful exchange that takes place, and I hope that the university spaces can start learning from these dialogues because they are enriching all of us. And we want to thank our Mexican sisters for giving us this bath of reality of how violence at the structural level and direct violence are affecting the daily lives of women who live in a context of such serious conflicts as, for instance, the Mexican case. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, there's a question that I wanted to ask. We don't have much time. This is for Jimena. Within your experience, yes, of Reinserta, your organization, how are you working with women in jail in terms of sexual diversity? With women prisoners, how are you working with them? Well, thank you. We mainly work with women that are mothers, and hand in hand, almas cautivas, we work with them. They are working directly with a lot of the women inmates and women they are working on sexual diversity. And we also have other very specific programs and women who just left prison. And we have a woman and she, for instance, belongs to LGBTQ community. So we look for a shelter for her to live in. And we do the follow-up process for women in jail who are set free. We've done this through partnerships. Our program is more towards motherhood and children, but we do work with other organizations. Well, thank you so much. Well, if you agree, let us close our panel. That has been so marvelous. And I want to thank everyone, Maria Eugenia, Isabel, Jimena. Thank you for sharing all this with us. I think we've created an environment of real conversation as if we were present face to face. But we are far away, but we are close at the same time. We want to thank everyone and all the presidents and Carmen and Laura for this work with Ibero University in Spanish. This is very important for us to continue weaving networks of feminist empowerment to change paradigms. So on behalf of everyone, thank you so much. And those listening to us that will be listening to us, thank you so much for this invitation. Have a wonderful day. Thank you very much. I want to thank everyone for participating in the panel. Thank you for moderating this panel. Yes, and Jimena, Maria, Isabel, Maria Eugenia, thank you for your excellent and enriching participations. Let us now give way to the next panel.